Hi everyone, I'm Sandra Ingerman and welcome to the Shamans Cave.
And I'm Renee Barabo, and this is Sami, and we're happy to be here with you today.
Yeah, we went from a sunny, nice day in Santa Fe to a wintry day as we're starting to move into spring. That typically is what happens is the temperatures keep fluctuating back and forth, and one day we think we're back in winter, and then the next day we're back in spring, and this goes back and forth again showing us how life is always changing.
It certainly is always changing, which kind of brings us to the conversation we're going to talk about today about cycles of nature and how, as nature cycles, so do communities and so do family systems and so do people in terms of relationships and how they live and thrive together.
Yeah, so I was telling Renee how back in the 19 early 1980s, when I first moved to Santa Fe, I had a student who was a sociology professor down at UNM. And his whole premise at that time, what he was really known about and what he lectured about and what people interviewed him about was that the nuclear family was dead. And of course, we saw it. We saw the move, how many people got divorced, and single moms were the big picture. And then things started slowly over time. We started to hear more about kids moving back home and not wanting to leave home. And I remember there was a while where there was a whole movement of kids moving back home where they wouldn't even get a driver's license. They didn't even want the responsibility of driving. They were getting jobs that they could ride their bike to or they could walk to. And so that became a whole thing because it was like, oh my God, all these parents in our country and in the world, they how much savings did they have? And all of a sudden their kids were moving back home. So this was turning into quite a dilemma in society. But as Renee was saying, nature always has a way to bring things back to a place of balance again. And now what we're seeing is all the new homes apparently that are being built. What I'm reading about is they're being built so that the kids can move back home and the parents can move back home so that it's one family, one big family again. And that goes back to community living. I mean, how people have always had. How do you survive unless you have a community? How do you survive? You can't do this on your own anymore. You can't. And so
No.
we're actually coming back to a place of balance of now families are actually living together and homes are being built so that that is a more comfortable way of living.
Yes, some you've probably heard me talking for the last 2 years. I built a place. Well, the place that I built has actually three living situations on there, so that could actually happen in this kind of place where, family adults could live upstairs. There's just a guest suite downstairs that's fully self-contained that an in-law could live at, and then there's like a little tiny house next door, and so. And when I consider adding to the rest of the property, I thought, all right, well, somebody could actually want to buy this place. And this me, I'm always thinking about buying and selling. That's just my nature. That somebody could actually buy this place where there's the house next door, but that they have all of these living situations on here for their family members. And so, without even knowing that we were going to talk about this, I thought, well, that's where I was just going in my own mind. Next week, I'm going home for a wedding, and my nephew is, he's actually buying the house of his grandmother, and they're moving, she passed away a few years ago, but he's actually moving back into the homestead where his dad grew up. And it's like, so like me, I ran as fast as I could when I was 17, and never went back home since, because that's what we did. We were independent. We are going to make it on our own, and we could afford to, because rent was like $100 a month. And now, taxes are like $25,000 a year in some of these places, and homes, with the interest rates the way they are, and the cost of a starter home being in the three or four, $500,000 range. It's like we have to really reconsider and reconfigure housing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do, I think it's really great how families are coming back together again. And I really see a vision. This is my own vision. I know it's happening. It's just you don't hear about it as much, but there are a lot of single women who don't have families, and so they're finding a way to build community and to share housing together and to be able to share resources and to be able to help take care of each other. And so, whether we're looking at it with families or whether we're looking at it with single people who are looking for more support than what they've had, we're actually seeing small communities starting to rebuild again
Hmm.
to help with survival. And that was the whole, I always say this, that was the whole point of initiation in shamanic cultures, was that a community couldn't afford to have a person who couldn't help everybody else walk forward and survive. They couldn't afford to carry anybody with them. They just couldn't. And there just wasn't the resources, there wasn't the strength. And so they put people through extreme initiations to see, do you have the strength to be able to contribute to your community to help everybody survive? And that's what initiations were really about, was about helping the community survive. And now we're in this immense life initiation between climate change and the amazing environmental events that are happening that are destroying cities and countries right as we speak. Where is everybody going to live? How is everybody going to survive without coming together once again in some kind of community type living?
Absolutely, and to know that, and Sandra and I, we've talked about this, because I believe that the shamanic movement as itself was going through its own initiatory period, where, as we all were separated. We went to these weekend retreats, and it was as more of a global type of movement. We went out and got the training. And now, the proof is in the pudding. How do we come back into our communities and make nice with everyone? And I think that's why I work at a behavioral healthcare company, is because it's not enough to just be over here, what I call it, sitting in your bath salts, having a shamanic experience. It's more about, how can I put it into action in the work that I do, or with other people, or that other people I work with need the healing support. Not only the people I work with for the healing support, because that trickles down to the patients who are getting the support, but that it's like, if it got disconnected from the organization or the organism of which it was living, it's now time for us to get reinstated into the organism of life, and to get back to the whole sole purpose of the shamanic communities, which was the propagation of livestock, that the community is healthy, that people can get healed if they're suffering. And we can't do that if we're sitting over around a fire in a retreat center in Sedona, when they need us over in Palm Desert.
That's right.
That's my soapbox. That's the premise of the work that I've been doing for the last couple of years, is really saying it's time to go back to your neighborhoods.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I wrote Welcome Home back in, again, I think the book came out in 1993, I wrote about old-time block parties and how we really, really needed to get back to that again. We really needed to reconnect with our neighbors and see that even though they have different opinions than us, that we're still people. And unless you're socializing with people, it's so easy to just say, no, they don't believe the same thing as me, or they're a terrible person because they believe in this. But if you're at a block party or you're at some get together where people are just talking and you actually get to feel a person's heart, all of a sudden you notice that what you thought was keeping you apart, it doesn't have the same charge anymore because you met them as a person, um, an actual human that has a heart, that has feelings, that has opinions, that had losses in their life that brought them to a particular place. That changes everything.
Hmm.
And when we can do that really deep listening, and when we can do that really deep connecting with people who live where we are, that's going to help heal some of the division also that we're going through.
It's interesting that, like, that was a visionary book 30 years ago, Sandra, because now we're back around to it. And I think I would imagine that most of your books were visionary, and the ones that were popular when they were, but they're evergreen. They're it's what we need now, and probably you had to write it 30 years ago, because who would have time to write all those books and one part of your life. So I'm really grateful that you wrote them, because we can talk about that. And I've talked to us about that, about when I was building the house, like on Whidbey Island. There's all these, so-called spiritual people, right? Like we want to lump ourselves in here, and then the more rednecky ones, the gun carrying. And I'm sure it's the spiritual people who carry guns. So I'm not making a judgment, but that uh, for me to build a house, I was working with laborers who had a very different viewpoint than me on most things. And that's when I can expand. That's when I can become a better healer, a better what? I don't know what Sami wants, but she has an opinion on this. But that it's when I can cross those bridges that I do my best work.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I've shared this story actually before on the Shaman's Cave. I was teaching at Omega Institute, and there was one of those storms, that was getting ready to shut down the whole entire East Coast. And I had another workshop in Europe, so I had to get home and pack, and I was so panicked that I wasn't going to be able to get home. And I'm sitting on this airplane, waiting, 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 and this guy is sitting next to me, and I was reading a book at the time. It was fiction, and it had something to do with the environment. And the guy said to me, I don't believe in climate change. And it turned out that he worked at Los Alamos lab. And so we weren't going to agree on anything. And I realized that I probably had 12 to 15 hours sitting next to this man left. And this is just to get into the air. We're just sitting on the ground. How is this going to work without me just putting my Sony headphones on and making believe he's disappeared out of my view? And I just decided to start a conversation with him as a person, just as a person. We didn't talk about the book, we didn't talk about Los Alamos, we just talked like two people. And after a while of talking like two people, he wanted to learn more about the book I was reading. And it's what happens. It's one of the biggest things I've learned traveling. because I was on the road 300 days a year, and I was with everybody in those airports. I mean, every walk of life. And I never met a person I didn't like if I didn't sit down and actually have a heart-to-heart conversation with them.
Mhm. I always think we can find more similarities than differences when people love their children. They love if nothing else, talk about their dogs or their pets or their cats because if they don't like animals, then you probably won't like them anyway. But I mean, but you can always find that common ground, and I find that nobody does it. They come with that heart of, they want to see the world better, whether they see how to get it there is a different way, and sometimes we just don't know. These last set of round of divisions, they're finding out that some of the stuff, there's truth to there's a little bit of truth to everyone's position.
Hmm.
There always is. And so, like, finding that common ground is not as hard as finding what separates you out, because a lot of times it's not even real.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's all made up anyway. It's like, what world do you want to live in? Well, I want to live in the one where we get along.
Right. Yeah. 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 And speaking of that, the equinox is coming up. And this is a good time for planting seeds, even though those of you in the southern hemisphere are moving into fall. It is still a time for spring gardening and fall gardening and planting seeds of what we do want to see. And I know that I keep sharing the same thing over and over and over again, but I realize I have to keep sharing it because I need to get it. And I really believe that people need to get it. It's like what Renee said, there is nothing real here. In this dimension of reality, there is nothing real here. So why aren't we planting the seeds of the dreams that we do want to see manifest instead of the seeds that keep creating the unbelievable nightmares that we're constantly going through? So why don't we choose to plant seeds about growing healthy communities where we can support each other as we grow through these coming times? And that's what I'd like to leave you with today.
And with that, there's nothing more to say because we're so on the same page about that. Um, Please share below and in the comments. If you could plant any magical seed you want for your community, what is it? I'd love to see a list of the magical seeds we're going to plant this spring or fall, because there's that fall growing season, and those seeds are really even stronger sometimes going into the fall, because those are the ones that are going to be in the cold earth as well, to come back up, those bulbs. One of the things that I did once was I planted tulip bulbs in the fall because I knew I would feel different when they came up in the spring. So let's plant some seeds of what we would like to see, and share that. Also hit subscribe. And I learned from my friend that if you hit like, that gives a logarithm
Yeah.
something more to play with as well. And we want to thank you. I was doing some research. Over almost close to 400,000 people or downloads or parts of listening to this station. So that's really great. Keep it up, and we'll keep it up.
We will keep it up. And also, I've learned that if you write a comment on YouTube to go with your like, it actually exponentializes your subscribe too. So we do this out of love, but we can also get more help from YouTube if you would be willing to help us too. So blessings, everyone.